Welcome Wargamers, this is Sam from Wargamer Online, and it's been a while since we did a premium tutorial, so I apologise for that. Hopefully this one is a good enough one for you to watch and enjoy. Let us know in the comments down below if you enjoyed watching this video. So this model is the Abaddon or not Abaddon model, and this is from Wargame Exclusive or Wargames Exclusive. It's a really nice miniature, it's absolutely huge, it's on a 40mm base. And it was a joy to paint, to be honest. It was sent to me by Marty, who is a viewer of the show, and he was looking for a commission painter to get this done, and I offered to do it for him. You know, he's done favours for me in the past, and I wanted to help him out, so hopefully he will enjoy this model. There is one part of this model which I notably forgot to paint, so I'll let you find out where that is, and if there's more than one, then I apologise. Twice as much or 3 times as much, but looking back at this now, I know there's definitely one step that I missed. So we'll get on to the paints. I will put a list up of everything that we have used. So there's quite a lot. You can cut this down a little bit. You don't need 2 of the oranges towards the end, you can just use the 1. But it's going to be quite a straightforward paint job. There's nothing too fancy, there's no wet blending, there's not really any proper difficult stuff on this model at all. Even the edge highlighting is the most basic that I could have done on it. So it's easy to follow, it's just a matter of choosing the right colours and just taking your time with it. Now, this has all been broken down into sub-assemblies by Marty in advance. So I just paint models in one piece. I don't normally have to paint them in components, but with this I have done. So I'm just showing you all of the parts that it comes with. I'm also going to break this video down into some of the detailed parts so I can put them up on YouTube. So I'll probably put the weapon and maybe the skin tone up on YouTube, but because you are a premium subscriber, you get to see the entire video on here, and you don't need to watch all of the little videos in between, unless you want to, unless you just want to watch a specific thing back. So the model has been primed with Chaos Black, and we're just going to start with the face, and we're using Rakarth flesh for this. Now we could have done multiple layers of this and blending it up, but we haven't. We've done Rakarth flesh. We're going to do a couple of washes, very thin washes, and we're going to use 2 layers to highlight this. But the main thing with this is that we get into all of these recesses. He's got quite a lot of cables around his neck area, I imagine, just to pump loads of crazy fluids and keep him alive and stuff. So maybe like a life support armor. He's been around since before the heresy, so he's obviously got a good life support machine going. Once the flesh has been put down, the base coat, we're going to use lead belcher, and you can see I'm just picking out all of these little cables now. And now we're going to tint this using Juchi Violet. I really like using purple wash on metallics and faces because it makes them look really chaotic and nasty. You can see just putting that purple over the Rakarth flesh, in my eyes he's chaos straight away. The only other thing he could potentially be is a dark elf, so we're gonna add a few layers to this to make it more towards the chaotic side, but using this purple tint is just such a huge, it sways it massively just by using this. And you can see I'm just going into all of these little recesses here. So now we're going to start highlighting this, and we're using Rakarth flesh with a mix of flayed one flesh. If you wanted to do extra layers, what I would say is just use Rakarth flesh and do a full layer of that, then do the mix of Rakarth and flayed one flesh, and then go as high as you want to, and just add a little bit of the highlight colour each time so that you've got more variation in the skin tone. To speed this up, I've just gone straight onto this mix just to try and get it done. And you can see all I'm doing here is turning the model around. I'm painting very fine little lines. He's got some wrinkles. He's obviously been fighting for chaos for a long time, so he's probably got like angry frown lines, so I wanted to make sure I painted those in place. We're using flayed one flesh straight out of the pot here. Obviously mix it down with a little bit of water just to thin it. And we're just picking out those raised areas where the light would hit the most. He's got tears in the top of his skin. We're going to make sure we get those, and also the top of the cheeks and the nose and the eyebrows. We're also going to pick out those wrinkles on his face that we put in at first, and we're just adding a lot of texture to this face. And it is a really nice, it's quite awkward getting down to his mouth because he's almost covered by the armour, but it was a really nice one to paint. We're going to taint the model a little bit more, make him look a little bit more chaotic. We're using Caribou Crimson for this, and I've added a little bit around his eye sockets and his cheeks already. You can see it's already made him look a little bit colder and darker at the same time, and we're just adding some in between the cables that go into his neck, so it looks like it's painful. It shouldn't be comfortable working for Chaos. It should be nasty and it should be gritty. So adding this red, the bruised skin will definitely help that. The final highlight for the skin is pallid witch flesh, and for this we're just going to really focus on the points and the areas that are going to hit the light's going to hit first. So the top of the brows, a couple of the wrinkle lines, and the nose and the cheekbone. Again, we're just going to add a little bit of pallid witch flesh to this. That's pretty much it. Keeping the paint thin, and you can, like I said before, you can mix the colours up. So if you wanted to do flayed one flesh mixed with some pallid witch flesh beforehand, then you'll get a better gradation, but it doesn't necessarily need it, so I skipped it. And you can see here I'm just painting some of the frown lines again. Very angry looking guy. He's failed so many times in the stories and the background. He's had so many crusades that have failed, or they haven't failed. They've all had a purpose, but in the grand scheme of things, it looks like it's failed. So he's probably angry by now. We're going to start using Balthazar gold now, and we're going to do all of the gold trim. And I didn't realise. I thought, Black Legion, it's going to be black. The general, the model is going to be black, but in actual fact this model is pretty much trim, or at least that's what I've painted it as. There's so much detail on this model, so it did take me a long time to go around and make sure that I was painting all of this trim with this gold before I went on to the next steps. And obviously if you're doing normal Space Marines and you're doing Black Legion, you probably have the trim on the shoulder pads, and a couple of locations it won't be as heavy as this. For the other areas I'm going to use Leadbelcher now for the other metallics, and we've got all of these pipes and cables. Again, if you were doing a Chaos Space Marine, you've got the ribbing and the pipes in between the armour, and you can paint silver for that. So you've got a good mix of black, gold and silver, and then the rest of your colours you just need to pick your colours that are going to stand out. On here we're going to use a red later on for his little hair that's coming out the top, and we're going to use quite dark colours for the rest of the model because I want it to look evil. With the silver as well, we're just going to pick out some of these chains that are coming down, and we're going to start painting the sword as well. Now with this sword, we're going to try and do a almost possessed demonic effect on it, as if the weapon's possessed. So it's not going to be very difficult to do at all. In actual fact, it will take 3 washers and a silver. It's so straightforward, but it has a nice effect. But the main thing is that you get a good base coat of silver down before we go on to that step later on. Now the other colour which is going to stand out, we're going to have the red from his hair. The other colour is going to be the bone, and that's probably the only other thing that's going to be bright other than his face. So we're going to paint this with Xandri dust, and as always when you're using these brighter colours over a black, you want to make sure that the paint is thin, and you want to do it in multiple layers. I did at least 3 layers with these bone areas just because it was going over black, and I wanted to have a nice smooth finish of it on it rather than being horrible and chunky. And the other thing as well is this model I think is supposed to have a black shoulder pad. His right shoulder pad is black, and I decided just to add a little bit more boniness to the model that I was going to paint his right shoulder pad with a bone instead. It's probably wrong, but I started painting this little jutty out bit here, and I thought, you know what, he's got like little chaos inscriptions on the shoulder pad itself. It could probably get away with being bone as well, so I did it. I just went for it. And sometimes you do that on models and it's a mistake. Other times you do it and it's not a mistake. I don't think it looks bad on the model. I just don't know whether Abaddon had, well, I know he didn't have a bone shoulder pad, but he has one now. The next colour is all of the cloth areas, and we're using Dryad bark for this. We're going to do quite a dark fabric, like I said. I don't want it to stand out from the rest of the model. I want the face to be the primary focus, and he's got like a little strap around his hair holding his hair together, so that little band is going to be painted with this. He's got like little back banners where the skulls are attached to, so we're going to paint that with this. And he's also got the hilt on his blade. So all of these areas I'm going to paint with this brown. On the actual Chaos Space Marines, I don't think there's a whole lot of fabric unless you put robes and things on there. Otherwise it is quite straightforward. We're using Mephiston Red, quite a bright red here, to paint the hair. And I think it stands out really nice. Something that I always like painting is red, gold and black. So any chance that I get, I'll use those 3 colour combinations, and with the bone as well. To be fair, this is probably, if I was going to paint an army, these 4 colours are pretty much what I would pick. You've got your bone, you've got red, you've got your black, and you've got your gold. And any other colours you can just mix in and kind of ignore. You've got your browns you don't necessarily need. Right, we're on to the magic mix now, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But this is medium, Agrax and Norn oil, and it's 2 parts medium, 1 part Agrax and 1 part Norn. And you know, I've used this for so long, look how nice this goes on. It just shades it perfectly. And when you're using a magic paint like Agrax Earthshade, or when you're using a magic paint like Norn oil, or Lamy Medium, they're all brilliant magical paints. When you combine the 3 of them together, what you get is something that you can use on pretty much any model. So I'd recommend making a pot of this stuff. Mine's pretty old now, you know, I always try and refill it and stuff, but I use this mix on so many different things and it works brilliantly. So definitely recommended. Pick it up, get a big pot if you can, one of them big dropper bottles, and just fill it up with this stuff, and you can see I'm just covering the entire model in it. Once that is fully dried, you can see it's darkened everything, all of that shade has gone into the recesses. Because we mix the medium into it, it doesn't have nasty watermarks, it just shades it and it goes over the surface perfectly. So we're using Retributor armor here to brighten up the gold. And normally if you're using Balthazar, you'd use something like Gehenna's, which is a little bit closer to the gold. But you can see that it's very stark, it's very different to the base colour that we've used. And it's bright, it's intentionally bright. And the reason for this is we're going to be picking out the edges. You can see I'm just running the brush along the edges of this armour and the trim. And that's pretty much all I want to do. I don't want to do a layer coat on this, I just want to get the edges. And there are some exceptions. So he's got like this skull detail on his waist area, and I'm going to paint almost like a layer highlight on that part, but for the most part it doesn't need anything else. You can see here, look, I'm just going to pretty much do the whole layer of this with this Retributor armor, and this makes it quite a ornate gold. It looks old, it looks worn, but it also looks like it was, you know, regal at some point. So that's the reason I've chosen Retributor. Otherwise, sometimes using Balthazar and Gehenna's, it can just look quite brassy. It doesn't look like gold, whereas this looks like an old gold. And this was another step that took a long time. You can see how much trim is on the model. But once you've done the gold, you know, you're pretty much at the end of this model. And Chaos Space Marines, they look fantastic with this colour scheme as well. Definitely going to have to do Black Legion at some point. Now, the final highlight for the gold, I'm using something else which is quite stark, and that is Stormhost Silver. I was going to say Stormcast Silver for a second then. I've got Stormcast on the brain. Now, I'm picking out the rivets, I'm picking out the very edges of the gold here, and that's pretty much it. I'm not going to do any layer highlighting with this silver. It is really just to show, you know, the light's going to hit, it's going to look quite bright, and you can see the contrast between the silver and the gold. It kind of works, so that's what I've gone with. You can skip this step if you don't like the overly contrasting look between the silver and the gold, but I kind of like it, so I did it. And at this step as well, we're also going to highlight all of the silver areas using Stormhost Silver as well. So just try and use as minimal colours as possible. We're highlighting the gold and we're highlighting the silver with this same one. And on the silver areas, you can see it's just making it look sharper, especially on things like the claws. It makes it look like it's been well kept, and it will slice through anything. So that's the reason we're using Stormhost for this. He's got some really nice weapons. I was going to do some lightning effects on that, but I didn't have time, unfortunately. Next, we're going to highlight the bone, and I only used the Shabti bone to highlight this, and it was a layer highlight. You can see I'm leaving some of the Xandri dust and the wash in the recesses, and I'm pretty much going to go over the rest of the skulls and do a layer highlight. In some areas, I am going to add some texture to it, so I'll paint some lines, and I'll paint that in almost the direction of a real face. So where the forehead is, there might be some lines on the forehead as if it's got some bone structure around the below, you know, some of the skulls have got like cracks in their heads as well, so I'm painting around the edges of that to make them stand out. Something I normally do is go straight up to Screaming Skull afterwards and do 2 highlights. I didn't do it on this, I actually don't know why. I just did a Shabty Bone. So if you wanted to go one step further, use Screaming Skull and just do a further highlight and just pick out the raised areas after that. Okay, on to the brown now. We're using Gorthor brown to highlight the robes or the cloth areas. It's quite a nice brown. It's very neutral. It doesn't stand out, and it doesn't look like leathery sort of colours like a lot of the browns do that I normally use. So it's quite subtle. It's there, it's highlighted, but it blends in with the model. So you don't really know it's there until you look at it. And you can see I'm just painting the edges of the folds on this. I'm going to do the same to the banners. I'm going to do the same to the top knot, the bandages sort of texture that's around his top knot. And I'm also going to do the hilt of his sword in exactly the same way. So this was quite a long, well, it took me quite a long time to paint, to be honest with you. I was trying not to mess up so much that I think I spent far too long on it, and I recorded the entire thing. I think it took me like 7 hours just to paint this one model, which is you know, a ridiculous amount of time for saying I've only used a base colour and 2 highlights at best. I haven't done any wet blending, I haven't done any proper edge highlights, I've just done a quick paint job. So I was quite, you know, I mean, maybe I need to paint more. I'm out of practice, I think. The next highlight on the browns is Baneblade Brown, and you can see I'm just picking out the edges of the straps that go around the hilt just to make them stand out, and they look really nice now. And I'll do the same with the rest of the browns on the model. And he is starting to come together. He looks really nice. He's going to have a nice base later on, and I am hoping that Marty does enjoy it and puts him into the army and doesn't just put him in a case and ignore him. Right, we will go on to painting the demonic weapon now. So starting off by using Druchii Violet again, same purple that we began with. I'm slapping it all over the sword here. It's quite, you know, liberal, straight out the pot. Then I'm using Guilliman Blue, which is a very bright blue glaze. And then I'm using Bloodletter, which is a red glaze. And all I'm doing is mixing the 3 colours just randomly across the blade and hoping that they mix and making them mix between those 3 colours. When it dries, it's going to be a mix of silver, red, blue and purple, and it looks quite nice. I'm just going to show you again on the other side of the blade, starting with the purple, just slapping it towards the base. I'm going to put some towards the top, the tip of the blade. Then I'm going to use the blue and just mix some of that into the purple. And same at the bottom part as well, just to make sure that we've got some tonal changes. And then we get the red and just mix that onto the other parts of the blade. And it's just random. There's no structure, or, you know, I'm just chucking it on there and seeing what happens. And when that dries, it looks nice. It's like a mutated magical demonic weapon. We're going to highlight the black. We're using Eshin Grey for this. It's not the greatest edge highlighting. I don't understand what's going on with me or my brushes at the moment, but I'm not getting the very nice edge highlights that I normally am happy with. So I apologise for this. But the other thing is this model doesn't have very many edges. It's almost like there's lines on the armour itself, but it's not like a normal Space Marine. Space Marines have got a lot of armour jutting out, so if you're painting a Chaos Space Marine model, you'll find it a lot easier to paint some of the black edges. And you can see where it gets to the easy parts, I'm just dragging the brush across the edge of that armour, and it's making it stand out. It's really bright. Go around all of the black on the armour where you can actually paint this, and then we're going to use Dawnstone to do the second highlight. I'm just going to show you a different area. These are the knuckles and the hand area, and just painting very thin lines across the fingers here, just to try and break up the black. And something else that I was tempted to do was go over this with the mix of the wash again, the medium, Norn and Agrax mix, but I didn't. Now if you wanted it to blend a little bit better, use the wash afterwards. It'll blend the greys with the black and it will then darken it down again. Depends what sort of black you want to go for. If you want something a little bit more cartoony, something that pops out a little bit more, then you don't need the wash. If you want it to be more realistic, go for the wash. It's down to your preference really. Right, now I'm just going to paint the eye on the weapon and his shoulder, and I'm just going to put a bit of Mephiston red on here, I haven't shown the entire thing, so it's a bit of Mephiston red. Then I just get Fire Dragon Bright and I just stick that into the middle while it's still wet, and I just blend the two of those together. And I haven't shown, but what I did after this was just do a very thin layer of Bloodletter to blend the two together, and then painted the actual eye part with some black ink. The red I'm just highlighting now with Evil Sun's Scarlet, and it's quite a rough, almost like a wet brush along the edges of these strands of hair, just to make sure that they get picked out. And then something that I like doing with reds now is using an orange to do the final highlight. So I'm using Troll Slayer orange. You could probably use Fire Dragon Bright if you've only got one orange. You could use the other one. I just like Troll Slayer orange because it's very much, it's more of a red, a reddish orange. So you can see that that really does contrast quite well. And again, if you wanted to put another wash to darken some of those recesses to make the contrast even more, then you could use Carroburg Crimson on the recesses of that hair, or even a Norn Oil, and it would look absolutely fine. So that is the model done. Sorry about it being a long one, 24-minute long video. I babbled on quite a bit. Hopefully you've taken some information from this that you can use on your models, and either use it on a copy of this Abaddon, or on a Chaos Space Marine model, or just on anything, because these colours work so well. My black dragons are pretty much painted in these tones as often as I can. So the end result looks nice. I'm going to do a separate video which will probably go up on YouTube on how I did the base, because it's very straightforward to do. I pretty much spray it with a grey, dry brush it a couple of times, and then use a weathering or a wash product from AK Interactive to get a really nice looking base effect. So if you want to do armies bases very quickly, I recommend checking that video out. This one's going to be definitely going up first, and I'm not sure when any of the others will be coming out, but keep an eye out. Other than that, thank you very much for watching the entire video. Thank you for surviving this long, and I hope you enjoyed it and you got something out of it, and I'll see you on upcoming videos.